Hello, and welcome to another installment of the Sea Realm podcast. I am your host, KMO, and this is episode number 319, Russian Dolls, prepared for release onto the World Wide Web on Wednesday, July 18th, 2012. In this installment of the podcast, I will play my most recent recorded conversation with Neil Kramer. Neil Kramer has been a guest on this program, well, I'm not sure how many times. I just searched SeaRealm.com for Kramer. I came up with a great many results. Sometimes he's just mentioned in the show notes. Sometimes I'm playing clips from a previous episode. But as far as I can tell, he has been a guest on the program 13 times, and he has been the guest host or correspondent on 2 different occasions. Neil first appeared on this program in episode number 71, Synchronicity Central, which I released on Wednesday, January 2nd, 2008. In addition to his many appearances on the Sea Realm podcast, Neil and I have also appeared together on a radio show that was recorded in studio in Montreal. That was with host Ed Yersh. And that was on the East Coast portion, the late 2009 East Coast portion of the Transitional Alchemy Tour. We met up again on the West Coast, and we did a speaking tour, sort of a couch surfing, living room, and other alternative venue speaking tour. Again, that was the Transitional Alchemy Tour. So Neil and I go way back. So he and I have an easy rapport, which I think you'll hear. He has a new book out. The book is called The Unfoldment, The Organic Path to Clarity, Power, and Transformation. And I'll read something off the back cover of that in just a moment. But first, I want to thank the very generous sponsors of this week's episode of the Sea Realm podcast. They are Feargal R., Jeffrey D., Blue Wave Technology, and Churnjit M. So thank you to Feargal, Jeffrey, Blue Wave Technology, and Churnjit. Contributions like yours help pay my internet bill. And it's really nice having a fast internet connection. It really helps with podcasting. The music on this week's show comes from Southside. I've played their music on many occasions, and the song this week is called Epic. So what is this book, The Unfoldment? Reading from the back, it says in bold type, shift your reality and reawaken your life. The Unfoldment presents a body of sacred wisdom and a deep spiritual perspective that puts real power and real magic into the hands of those who seek a path of awakening. Neil Kramer draws on a lifetime of spiritual encounters and experiential gnosis to formulate a unique synthesis of metaphysics, mysticism, and esoteric knowledge. Genuine hands-on tools and teachings for transformation and enlightenment in the 21st century. The Unfoldment is a natural human process, a journey of growth, realization, and ascendance. For the first time, Neil Kramer's insights, techniques, and ideas are brought together in one inspirational work that has the power to change lives. The book fuses profound spiritual philosophy and dynamic practical application, specifically designed to help you claim your power, create a life of authenticity, resonance, and fulfillment, dissolve illusions and repattern old wiring, liberate the mind from systems of control, master emotional alchemy, transform pain and embrace flow, unveil the secret teachings and hidden histories of our ancient ancestors, understand the intimate relationship between light and shadow, creation and destruction. And in the interview, I make reference to something from J.R.R. Tolkien's book, The Silmarillion, something that Neil and I were actually listening to. We were listening to the audiobook of The Silmarillion as we drove up the west coast of the United States on that Transitional Alchemy Tour. And reading something from his book, I was reminded of something from The Silmarillion. So I'm not going to read from The Silmarillion because I still haven't found the passage that I was looking for, but I am going to read a passage from Neil's book. This is from page 53. And I won't do a lot of explaining here, but I think the point will become clear very early in the interview. So on page 53, Neil writes, "The fourth density is characterized by non-physical energetic being. Without the need for the anchor of physical form, entities in this realm can move, evolve, and transmute themselves in a more restricted manner. Form is still available, though it is infinitely more pliable and molds to conscious emanations instantaneously. This is the last density, where negative conduct and the conflict of war are operational." So in the interview that you're about to hear, I never actually got around to referencing that particular paragraph or reading it or asking Neil to comment on it, but it was in my mind to do so the whole time. So keep that in mind as you listen to my most recent conversation with Neil Kramer, which begins right now.
You're listening to the C Realm podcast and getting it all reconnected 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 and getting it all reconnected.
You are listening to the C Realm podcast. I'm your host, KMO, and I'm joined once again by Neil Kramer. Neil, welcome back to the C Realm podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here, KMO. It's been a while, but it's good to hear your dulcet tones once more.
Thank you, sir. I am holding in my hand a book. It is called The Unfoldment, The Organic Path to Clarity, Power, and Transformation by Neil Kramer. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
I have read it from cover to cover. Much of it I read on the subway as I was going to and from my gigs in the Brooklyn artisanal food industry. But, yeah, I've had a great time with it. You know, when you know somebody.
Cool.
And you and I, we took a road trip together, and we've been talking on Skype for years now. And when you know somebody, as much as you might regard them highly, you also think, oh, well, this is somebody I know. You know, this is not a published author. And even though he's got a book out, that's just some sort of trick of reality. You know, it's still not a published author.
No.
And as I was reading the book, I would come across passages where I just think, wow, that's really good stuff. I'm glad I know this guy.
Thank you.
And so, by way of introduction to the book, I just want to pick out one passage that it was one that I read it and I knew that if I'd had a highlighter on me, I would have highlighted it at the time. And right now it is the only highlighted passage in the book. It occurs on page 54, and you wrote, "From time to time, we take it upon ourselves to conceptualize, calculate, and inquire. We seek to devise the best working model of how this place hangs together, and how we might subsequently move through it with a little more style. This is the human impulse. What matters is that we bring this endeavor into our felt experience, not just our conceptual understanding. We make our conscious ascendancy from one density of being to another part of our everyday lives. It is why we're here." And I think that whole paragraph makes perfect sense to somebody who hasn't read the book, except possibly this bit about moving from one density to another. What's that all about?
Well, it's just a modern word for what our mystical ancestors would call realms or planes, to be honest. If you say dimensions, it infers space. And having discussed some of my ideas with New Agers, it's all very straightforward. They're just like, yeah, man, yeah, wow, yeah, great. When you discuss it with a physicist or a chemist or somebody with a more reductionist mindset, they go, well, that's all very well, but when you say dimension, the very word itself is structured around an inference of space. And you're not, strictly speaking, talking about that, are you? And I'm like, no, that's true, actually. That is true. And you realize that the very verbiage that you've been using yourself is not absolutely accurate. So I'm always ready to upgrade my own sort of lexicon, really. And so density is actually a slightly more precise bit of terminology to say, if you have a very coarse kind of consciousness, and not in a judgmental sense, not in a moral sense, but in a very physical, very actual way, you could say that is a low density thing or a high density thing. It depends on your point of view. And as you ascend, as you refine your consciousness, that density shifts. And I feel that the whole process of being, a sentient entity on this planet is about refining one's consciousness. And sometimes that means doing a lot of thinking and a lot of theorizing. And sometimes it means the very opposite. It means doing no thinking. It means practicing the art of being more than any sort of discursive or discernment of any description. Any discursive dialogue, really, as any Zen master would tell you, is okay. It gets you to a certain point, but once you reach it, you've done that now, and it's not something that you take forward. So I think that density shows you that you can only achieve a certain density with a certain set of tools. So if all you do is think, you're going to stop at what I would call the third density, the 3D here. If you push that a little bit, and if you experiment with meditation and with not doing, or even with psychotropic plants or chemicals or various different techniques to shift your consciousness, you can move that density a little bit so you're operating at a different frequency. And if you're a scientist, it just is some bizarre aberration of the brain. If you're a spiritual person, you're basically just peeping around the corner into the next realm, as it were, into the next density. And so really that word is an effort to say, it's kind of like radio waves. I'm sure everyone's heard this by now, that they're all squishing around together. And just because you switch to one, it doesn't mean the other one's gone away. And the idea of a density really is a description of that oscillation, of that waveform. To say very, very fast, tight waveforms require a much lower density to get to them. I mean, it is kind of mapped out earlier on in that chapter, kind of what we're talking about. To be honest, by the same token, I don't mind making the reader work a bit for it. So, you know, as you write in this stuff, as you'll know yourself from things that you've put out, including your works, you choose how you're going to pitch it. And I know that if the reader has to do a bit of work themselves, it makes it a more engaging and rewarding experience. If you map everything out and it's like, number one, sit down quietly and take a deep breath. Number two, imagine a vast ocean before you, like consciousness. Number three, you know, and if you map it out like that, and many books do, and that's fine, but you don't really give the reader the opportunity to apply it to themselves. So if you leave a little gap, so here's what this guy experienced, here's some old wisdom, here's some new reference points, here's some new language. Now you apply that in your own way, in your own life. Then the person who is really interested in kind of transforming themselves and making themselves a better woman or a better man, they can then think, I get what he's doing now. So the application, to some extent, although he's pointing to it, is up to me. So the people who are going to be most rewarded by this book are the people who kind of get that. And I think when you talk to a lot of people and when you broadcast a lot and when you are creative as part of your weekly stuff, you get that pretty quick. If you're very solitary and if you don't talk to a lot of people, it might take a little bit longer. So there's loads of very, very direct points in the book, signposts in the book to say, apply this. You know, as Bruce Lee said, knowledge without application is useless. Apply this, bring it into your felt experience. So that is a powerful theme throughout the book, really.
There's a passage that I'm looking at, and it deals with fourth density beings, and it's very, very provocative, at least to me. But before I say anything about it or ask you to say anything about it, I'd like you to run through the 7 densities right quick and explain why this chapter 5, is called Russian Dolls.
Sure. The 7 densities really are very natural orders of reality as far as I'm concerned. So the first density is what I would describe as pure undifferentiated being. So it's like minerals, rocks, wind, ocean, space, that kind of thing. The second is where that differentiation changes and things take on their own aspect. So you might get an animal or a tree. The third density is like self-awareness springs from that. And this is obviously a key stage in that journey where sentience comes into the being in a self-reflective way. So those first 3 densities characterize our normal world, if you will. And it's important to know, and this answers the second part of your question, that each realm enfolds the preceding realms, like the Russian doll metaphor. So the third density wraps the second and the first, and to some degree gives dominion over those, certainly in a conscious space. The fourth density is where non-physical energetic being is a strong characteristic. So anybody who has changed their conscious processor, if you like, with, let's call it, a plant ally, will know that you can see that stuff, and you can see these other kinds of intelligences and this other kind of structured world, but it operates in a totally different way. And one is tempted to imagine that it's an imaginal realm at first. And ironically, to a degree, there is an element of that in how that place is shaped, but it also has absolute independent existence in my experience. So the fourth density space is the most common supernatural or paranormal realm that we have regular contact with. Most people infrequently and spontaneously. When you focus on it, obviously you can have more consistent experiences with that, and that really is what marks out the regular guy from, let's say, the shaman or the wizard or the sorcerer or whatever. So the sorcerer is just somebody who moves between those worlds and has a certain amount of capacity for holding the energy necessary to do that, because it requires a lot of energy. It's like kind of, the tremendous energy required to do sort of particle collision or whatever. You need this enormous amount of energy, and so it is, I believe, with consciousness, that you can't kind of do it after a long day's work and you put the kids to bed and you sat there with a cup of hot chocolate and think, right, I think I'll move into the fourth density now. That's not how it works. It requires extraordinary feat of energy management. And the fifth and the sixth and the seventh, to some degree, go into realms where you'd say multi-dimensional being, in the sense that multiple selves and densities and identities can be kept simultaneously. So you no longer identify yourself as an individual on this kind of soul journey. And markedly, the thing of polarity, good and evil, black and white, hot and cold, up and down, creation and destruction, that force, that attractor repeller force that pings us around in this world, recedes altogether in the fifth density. And the sixth and the seventh, really, to be quite honest with you, they're just there to say this is kind of what it looks like, but your experience and our conception of that is so distanced that it really is rather speculative. But we can look, over 4,000 to 5,000 years of history of spiritual inquiry, and people have said, well, yeah, the sixth density realm, there is a strong creational aspect in that. So that's the first point where you get to actually make new stuff, not just reorganize existing stuff, change energy into another form, but actually create, which is, in a Christian sense, is a sort of high angelic capacity. And the seventh density is a tremendous wholeness and what we would call divinity, where, you can demonstrate a complete sort of mastery of the previous realms. And I would say that model, as I say later on in that chapter, it's kind of arbitrary choosing 7, frankly. You could say 9 or 21 or 11 or 57. There's many good reasons to do that, and some other people who work in similar kind of mystical fields to me would have 5 or 9 or whatever, and we sort of disagree on that. It's totally not relevant, that. It's not worth discussing for me, that. The fact that we can move into another space, another realm, another density, another type of experience is enough. How we track that and how we articulate that terrain is always essentially a very subjective and personal process. You're always representing your own particular viewpoint at any one time, and I'm kind of happily, I think, free from the conceit of saying this is the way things are. That's never really put forth in any way, shape or form in this book. What is put forth is, here's a guy and this is the way I see things. These are reality models, and like all models, they're representational. Nothing is to be taken literally. Nothing. It's all with a pinch of salt. It's all really to assist us, in quotes, in thinking about things in more creative and authentic ways. And throughout that, the reader is offered the opportunity and reminded of the possibility of upgrading all that stuff for themselves and saying, oh, that's quite good, but if you did this, or you said that, or you inserted this bit of text, that would be way better. And it's like, great, you do that, you upgrade it for your own application. So, they are models presented here to say, this shows us a better way of thinking about things than what you're going to see on television or in a lot of textbooks, I would say, in a school and university scenario. And also, it disinfects from the sort of morbidity and gloom of the mainstream news, which I'm, very sincere and determined to kind of make this an uplifting experience to say, don't give up, don't be a doomer, don't say it's all for nothing, don't think we're just little microbes floating about in a huge, cold, clockwork universe. That is not good enough. That's not good enough, and it's just complete fallacy. So it is a bit of a rallying cry as well to say, hey, that's nonsense. There's a better way of doing that. So I hope I've achieved that in writing this.
Just before we hooked up via Skype for this conversation, I had taken my copy of the Silmarillion down off the shelf, and I was looking for a particular passage which I did not locate, so I can't read it to you, but I'll try to reproduce bits of it from memory. The book starts with the creation of the universe by Iluvatar, who is God. Mm-hmm. And Iluvatar has a chorus of beings who are the children of his thought. They're pieces of his mind, and these are the Ainur. And the Ainur sing a song which is an image of the universe, and Iluvatar says, hey, let's make that a real thing. And so the whole history of the universe has already been revealed in this song, but he gives it being, and he sends the Ainur down into the world to interact with its unfoldment. And down in the world, they become the Valar. And the Valar are described as having definite characteristics. They have personality, they have gender, but they don't have a form that is any more a part of them than our clothes. And they can travel without their form, or they can change their form as the situation is appropriate, and it is the equivalent of humans changing their clothes. And when I thought about these fourth dimensional beings, or these fourth density beings, I thought of the Ainur, things that can participate in the world of form but are not bound by it.
Yeah, it's funny, I've been reading the Silmarillion last week, by the way, a nice synchronicity. Yeah, it's one of those things, as Morpheus said, you can't really be told what the Matrix is, you have to see it for yourself. If I'm sat talking to a regular guy, it could be like a surgeon who's, respectable, intelligent, urbane, sophisticated individual, and he says, so what's all this unfoldment 4D bullshit you're writing about, Kramer? You're a smart guy, what's all that hippie, weird, woo-woo, nonsense, fluffy craziness? What the hell are you talking about? And rather than get into a discussion about that, I'd say, look, to be honest, you need to go and check it out for yourself. And here's some places where that's likely to happen. You could put this substance in your mouth, or you could smoke this substance, but that's going to cloud the issue, because that's going to leave question marks about the reality of it, the substantiality of it, the consistency of it. So I wouldn't recommend that, but go to this place and have this kind of experience. And there's many places in England and Europe and North America that do that, and elsewhere, but those are the places I'm most familiar with. And those fourth density beings, I think, are as much part of the natural organic order of this universe as the bloody raccoons and the eagles and the humans and the whales and the, turtles are, whatever. It's all part of nature. And just as like an amoeba would look up to a human being and think, holy cow, it's a divine entity, it's a divine emanation with godlike powers. So we would look right out of a density, right out of our dimensional space, into another space, in quotes, and think, goodness me, what incredible power of telekinesis and telepathy and bilocation and all this kind of stuff. Because that space enwraps ours, they can fold it, do stuff with it, jump around on it all the time easily. And we're starting to believe that at a tiny level, at a quantum level. And, 5,000-6,000 years ago, our mystical brothers and sisters were laughing, saying, yeah, well, we do that stuff all the time, really. But psychically, the level of awareness and knowledge comes up and down. And I've always known that our civilization now is at one of the lowest points, technologically speaking, that we've ever been at in millions of years of the human story. And it's very esoteric and very controversial to say that. Perhaps not to many of the people in your audience, apart from the people who are not necessarily versed in this. But a flexible, open-minded audience would say, yeah, well, that's a possibility. But going for the tracks and the traces and the evidential trail of that is rather a difficult thing to do, because there isn't really much after a certain period of time. And our methods of dating things and that are left very much open to interpretation. So, as I said earlier, I just kind of ditched that altogether and say, well, what's another way of doing it? Okay, a really good way of doing it is to actually make contact with those kind of entities and talk to them. Now, 20 years ago, if someone had said to me, this is a really good book, Neil, and I think you'll enjoy reading it. Oh, by the way, it's a channeled book. It's channeled from the Pleiadian system or from another dimension. I'd be like, I'd just put it down and think, oh my God, that's a shame that, that's probably never going to be read, by me, whatever. As time has progressed, that's not appropriate course of action for me anymore to do that. It would not be true for me to do that anymore because of the experiences I've had and the things that I have brought into my consciousness and the incredible wisdom that I've seen passed down through what we could rightly say as inexplicable sources, frankly. And I think you reach a point where you say, well, I'm always going to have to be careful now in our talk about this, because people might come along to Neil Kramer and think, yeah, he's a good guy, he can do some self-development work and do some coaching with me. And I do a lot of that in my week-to-week, month-to-month schedule. I do a lot of that stuff. And some of those people are very plain in their philosophy about themselves and the world, do not think supernaturally, do not think metaphysically necessarily. And if they came across this idea that, well, yeah, I also recognize this much wider realm with these Tolkien-esque forces interacting through history, through the millennia, through different aspects of being, then that's a stretch, but I have to allow that to become part of my work. So again, making sure that kind of stuff is in this book is true for me, is to say, look, I could leave this out, I could very cleanly define an audience sector to market this to, but no, this isn't about that for me. This is about saying, here's a bunch of things that I think are really significant, all of them. Some of them you're going to swallow really easily, some of them you may not so much. And other people still will say, yeah, this is all brilliant, but, really, really, I want you to go really far out, really to the outer edges or whatever. And that kind of stuff obviously may come in the second and third and fourth and fifth books or whatever, but that kind of stuff is really best done, I think, face-to-face, one-to-one in felt experience. There's a reason why many mystical texts don't go into quite the juicy detail about certain things that the readers might have been hungry for. I was, when I was a young man reading these books, and thinking, still they're not quite getting to it. And now I understand why, and that's because you can't put that down on a page, because it's kind of disrespectful, and it's certainly a dishonourable thing for the author to do if he knows what some of those things are. So some of those movements of energy, some of those spaces that you can create to have transcendental experiences, paradigm cracking experiences, really, that has to be brought into individual's life. You can't prescribe it at all. So it's funny realizing that now, and a little bit me being in that position where I can do those things, can bring about those experiences for others. To put that in a book is very tempting because it's juicy and it, will raise its profile and be very bold claims, but it's not appropriate. So you're always outlining it and saying, well, this is the shape of it. This is the potential manifestation for it, but you have to fill it in. You have to bring the vividness and the colour and the reality of that yourself into your own life. And the ways of doing that are, let us say, encoded in this book, sometimes literally, sometimes metaphorically. It's all there. And so for the person who's really interested, who doesn't just want to be titillated by phenomenology or by anomalous stories, for the person who's really interested in recognizing their own sacredness and their own growth and their own presence and purifying their consciousness, then they'll be able to pull out all kinds of layers from this book, because those are the things I'm interested in. And so you can bet that they are embedded deeply into this text. I mean, it is approachable by all levels. I've written it consciously for that. But for old-timers who've been walking the path, as it were, for 30, 50, 70 years, they're going to look at this and get something new out of it, something fresh out of it. There's some new insights in here, I think. For total newcomers, it's also a safe pickup. You can go across the introductory dialogue. The subplots may not reveal themselves until a second reading, like a movie or whatever, and you think, I get what's going on. Yeah, there is a deeper movement here. I've always been impressed by books that have done that in the past, so I have endeavoured to do that in this book too.
You're listening to the C Realm Podcast. C stands for consciousness.
You are listening to the C Realm Podcast. I'm your host, KMO. I'm speaking with Neil Kramer. Neil's got a new book out. It is called The Unfoldment. Neil, before the musical break, you were talking about what I might consider Easter eggs or possibly hidden gems inside the text of your book that won't necessarily present themselves to the uninitiated reader on the first pass through. And I won't ask you to point any out, because I take it from the context of your last exchange with me there that wouldn't really be appropriate or even useful.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But if you'll remember, a while ago, it might have been your most recent appearance on the C Realm Podcast, I asked you a parting question, and I said, I'm not going to ask for the answer to this now, but I will ask for it the next time we're on Skype together for the C Realm Podcast. And you've already made references to the answer in your answers to my previous questions. One way to experience these things for yourself is, as you say, to put something in your mouth and swallow it, or inhale some smoke, but that's not necessarily appropriate. Another way to do it is to go to certain places where these energies and these activities are more prevalent. And you've written and spoken a lot about crop circles and the area of the English countryside where most of them in the world spring up in a certain season. But you've also made references, unspecific references, to places in North America where that same quality of existence can be found. And I wonder if there's any place that you can mention, even just in broad strokes, where somebody might go to encounter these sorts of things.
My approach to that question is obviously based on the places that I've been to, where there are definite physical and, might I also say, emotional amplifications that assist that shift of consciousness. And I think it's, you have to say it's to do with the land, and I don't necessarily mean the soil, the whatever is under our feet, the grass and the rocks or whatever. I mean the whole kind of ecology of the environment, everything to do with it. The sunlight, the temperature, the cloud, the culture, the resonance, the sort of hard disk drive recording of the land itself, everything, the whole shebang. Certain areas definitely seem to do that. So in Wiltshire in the UK, as you mentioned, a lot of crop circles there. There's something about the aquifers, there's something about those imprints in the land. So it depends what sort of phenomena and what sort of conscious shift you're looking for. So I lived in upstate New York for a while, and as you go to the woods and the forests there, you definitely find places where there is, it sounds a bit new agey this, but like an energy vortex. You can feel it. And you could, as long as you didn't puke up, get in the car, get your friend to drive, put a blindfold on, you sit in the passenger seat, put a blindfold on, and just see how you feel as you move around. Still your thoughts, get into a contemplative, gentle space of equilibrium, just move everything aside, don't think about anything, just a little meditative state, and you can feel it. It's like walking down a city street and you feel something weird or feel something excellent, or you walk into a venue to see a band and you think, this just feels cool tonight, this is just going to be good, and you're right, and it's just the same thing. It's that certain places support and encourage that kind of movement. So up in the Adirondacks, certainly on the approach to that, there's places like that. Over here, I live in Oregon now, and I've also lived in Washington State, and this kind of forest, this ancient arboreal forest, really that stretches in a big arc from Northern California all the way up and through and into Canada. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of ancientness in it, and even where it breaks into city regions and towns. And as you know, here in Portland, where I live now, you can stand high up on a hill in the middle of the city or on the top of the roof of a building. You can see these mighty volcanoes, like Mount Hood and Rainier and Mount Adams. They definitely contribute to that. They definitely have an effect on that. The real answer, though, if somebody said, well, where can I find things near me? Go to the indigenous peoples, the oldest, whoever that is, whether it's Native American types, whether it's Mexican types, whether it's Irish, Pishog, mystical books, whether it's songs, whether it's whatever. Go to the lore of the folk lore, and look at what they say. So I have done that on a number of occasions, and you can do it online and cheat a bit, of course, if it's a well-known area where there is some literature or there is some oral history more likely from, a few hundred years ago. But you can also go and speak to people as well. If you can do that, and if you can get yourself organized in that manner, go and speak to people. And those places are very well known, those little vortices in various places. And like I say, it's just if you were to put it in everyday street lingo, it's just places with the good vibes. Certainly, I went to speak at a conference by that this guy James Gilliland puts on up in Trout Lake in Washington, and that's one such place. There's no question about it. I've seen maybe 20 since I've been here. That's one of them. And the Native American peoples of the area, the Klickitat, they would say, yeah, there are distinct areas here. The Heavenly Plains, one of their areas was called. And traditionally, warriors would come to heal in that place at the foot of Mount Adams. And they would use various locations there, shamanically, as we would say now. To them, it was just part of everyday life. It was nothing spooky or special. It was just things that they did as part of their domestic routines every day, week in, week out. But when you detach that from the sort of mainstream unreality signal, it all seems very weird and spooky and legends and mythologies and supernatural weirdness. It isn't at all. It's just people who've said, well, I don't quite get it, because this was 1,000 years ago and they didn't have quite the language or the instrumentation to model it in a sophisticated way. But some dude would walk into a field and say, for whatever reason, I'm telling you guys, this place here has something. It pushes, it amplifies, it gives a greater potentiality for whatever you're doing. So if you want to open your heart a bit and become more emotionally capable, this is a place where you would do that. If you're ill and you want to boost your immune system, come here. If you want to get into a meditative state and pop out of self, pop out of being Kramer or being KMO. I mean, that is the secret of wizardry and sorcery and shamanic capacity, is put self to one side for a minute and pop out and come out and do stuff. If you want to do that, if you sit in a normal place, in a normal city, in a normal room, that's going to be really hard, and it could take you 25 years to even get a sniff of it. If you go to a power place, usually an organic, natural environment manifestation with not a lot of technology around it, but not always. Sometimes they can be in very unusual places, in parks and down normal residential streets and stuff. If you go to that place, that environment hugely supports that kind of movement of consciousness, simply by virtue of the fact that it's attuned to that. And it's nothing new, this. You know, people have mapped out this grid, and we call them ley lines and dragon lines and telluric energy, nodal points and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, sometimes the language is so abstruse that people just get turned off by it and think that's just nonsense, you know, that's crazy what they're talking about. It's just like everything else. The mystics will go out there, you know, put the balls on the chopping board and think, well, I don't know why this is the way it is. I don't quite get it. I don't quite understand it. But this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm feeling. This is what's happening. I'm not interested in why and what the mechanics are. Someone else can figure that out later on. But this is the pioneering experience. This is me finding something and just telling you how it is. And all we have to do with those people is have faith in their own authenticity and integrity. So if you ask me something offline as a friend and said, so straight up, what happens at such and such a place? I'll give you the same answer that I'm giving you now. It's the same thing. And that's all the mystic's obligation is to tell the truth to some extent. You don't need to frame it particularly differently from a private environment to a public environment. It's the same thing, really. So I would say when somebody is attempting a maneuver of consciousness, reconfiguring it in a different way, if you really want to accelerate that, and you have to be prepared for it, because it can be a deep acceleration and it can do funny things, and if you're not ready for it, it can be very unsettling, then there are particular places for that, and they exist all over, and privately we all map them all the time. It's just that we're not necessarily conscious of it. We have places that we gravitate to and like and just go to. You know, you go to, yesterday I was at a hill overlooking the ocean, and it just has a certain resonance. This particular place has a certain melancholic resonance as it happens. And it kind of is a place to process the past in a way, particularly sad things or difficult things. And I've been there like 3 or 4 times over the last few years, and it's always like that. So it's not just me being a big sentimental, weird sort of, self-indulgent person. It's not that at all. That place definitely does that, and it's something to do with the land, something to do with the ecology of that environment. And so I go around a little more consciously now, thinking, well, okay, let me map out these areas that have distinct supportive capacities for certain conscious maneuvers. So if you need a little help, if you need a little boost, or if you're working, in quotes, magically, and you're definitely doing things that are outside the norm, outside the mainstream, these places help tremendously. Only in a ritual sense, in a way. There is a physical aspect to it, but they're showing you something. It's a bit like taking the mushroom, you know, as McKenna would say, or taking peyote or something. If you're still doing that chronically, 20, 30, 50 years later, I say you've missed the point. The plant ally is showing you how to do something. And ultimately, if you totally get that, you can start to do it without it. As William Burroughs said, anything that can be done with a chemical can be done without a chemical. But you've got to understand how it happens. You've got to get to it yourself. So if you get that funny psychedelic rush of the reality, sort of the pack of cards, you know, crumbling away, I've seen that exact same thing in a power place with a totally clean state of mind, with nothing, just my normal organic grey blob of a brain sat there, same feeling, same thing. And you're almost thinking, has somebody put something in my tea? You know, why is this happening? And it's just a remarkable reminder that all those things, even the power places, they're just showing us something, saying, here, look at this, look at how this works. And don't expect that you need me to do it every time. They are teachers, the plants, the places, the rocks, the ocean, the trees, the rivers. They teach us to say, look at how this works. This is what I specialize in. This is all that I do. Let me show you how this works. And our job, to some degree, is to take a note of that and go away with it and make ourselves capable of doing that without any support, without the teacher stood by our shoulder, without any chemicals, without any of that stuff, and just do it totally naturally.
Well, I think we've got time for just one more question. Jan Irvin has written an article or a series of articles recently about Gordon Wasson, who popularized psilocybin mushrooms in the first world with his article in Life magazine. And Jan's contention is that the Council on Foreign Relations and the CIA and other entities up to no good deliberately seeded the public consciousness with this fascination for psychedelics and for what he calls psychedelic Orientalism, or a sort of self-indulgent mysticism, in order to sabotage any effective countercultural action against power elites. And he has various investigations that he's done, and he can cite documents in support of this contention. But I thought back to something that I heard on the Stormy Weather podcast years ago. Jason Horsley, or Aeolus Cephas at the time, was saying that he didn't take entheogens, and he didn't advise people taking entheogens, because just as crippling as ignorance can be, too much revelation too quickly in the wrong context can be just as debilitating. And I wonder if you have any comments on that idea.
I have a very clear understanding that if you transport somebody, like the teleporter on Star Trek, on the Enterprise, if you teleport somebody from one realm to another who's never done that kind of stuff before, and there's no journey between the two, you sat there on the sofa having a cup of coffee, and the next minute you're in this kind of crystal castle, elven Rivendell place with all these crazy life forms of which you've seen nothing remotely similar ever before. There is a problem with that, because you cannot integrate that, because there's not been the journey between the two. So it's kind of like a very sensitive maneuver that for certain individuals sometimes. To be doing that chronically and to be doing that habitually and saying this is it, this is a great way of proceeding, it's like you become dependent on the transporter, on the teleportation method, and you learn nothing of the journey from where you are to that place. And the journey is it. It's not the place, it's not the beings. That's just like some masturbatory visual indulgence. That's irrelevant, really. It's all about the progression of your consciousness from where you are to that place, to that realm, to that organic 4D ascendancy. If you just keep teleporting into it with mushrooms, with DMT, with whatever, that doesn't really give very much. In fact, it takes more than it gives. And I have to note that the people I know who've done heavy psychedelic use are not very wise people in their own day-to-day lives. They are not. And the wisest people I know, who have tremendous organic compassion and wisdom and multi-spectrum human beings, don't do psychedelics very often, if at all. They don't. And I have to correlate those two things and take notice of that. So it's like anything, you have to be judicious and cautious and think about what it is that you're actually doing. Not just to go out there and go to Disneyland and come back and go, wow, man, that was cool. You know, that's acceptable a few times in your teenage years, and that's about it. After that, that's not good enough on the path of the unfoldment of my path anyway. That wouldn't be good enough. That's poor performance, that. You have to be better than that. So you use it judiciously in the sense, if you need to see what happens after you come out of your body, if you want to have a peep at death, if you want to have a look at a fourth density realm, then that might be a thing to do. That might be appropriate to do that. If you have something locked away inside yourself, a trauma, a wound that you can't get to, a deep one that's affecting your life, that's influencing you negatively, it might be okay to take ass-kicking therapeutic ayahuasca to get to that. That might be the thing to do. But you have to look at it and not take anybody else's advice on how good or bad or indifferent it is. You have to find that out for yourself, and you have to find those you have a resonance with. You have faith in what they've said about their experiences and draw your own conclusions. Even going on heroin, it's so swamped with crazy, fragmented experience reports. It's hard to find a clear track, a clear balance on any information on that. So you have to in the end do it for yourself. And I think that strong, constant, heavy use of psychedelics is absolutely an impediment to growth. Absolutely, no question about that. As to whether they have a place in a shamanic mechanism in someone's life, yes, of course they do. And it's as simple as this. They're a medicine, really. And if that medicine becomes an habitual part of your week-to-week patterning, then you've missed the point. You've made a mistake. Not a disaster, but correct the mistake. Do something about it. And it's as simple as that. It's medicine and should be treated as such.
Well, I'm sorry to say that is all the time we have for this conversation. But Neil, people who are interested in what they've heard, they can find a lot more in your book. Again, it is called The Unfoldment, The Organic Path to Clarity, Power, and Transformation. Neil Kramer, thank you very much for participating on the C-Realm podcast.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here as ever.
You're listening to the C-Realm podcast. Your mind, 1 week at a time.
That was Neil Kramer. His book is called The Unfoldment, The Organic Path to Clarity, Power, and Transformation. And the music that you heard in the middle was by Southside. You can find a link to Southside's website in the show notes for this episode, as well as to Neil Kramer's website, although it's really easy. It's neilkramer.com. A book that I'm reading right now is one that Duncan Crary sent to me. Thank you, Duncan. It's called Too Much Magic, Wishful Thinking, Technology, and the Fate of the Nation by James Howard Kunstler, author of The Long Emergency and longtime guest here on the C-Realm podcast. And I think that title, Too Much Magic, might well describe the C-Realm podcast of late in the minds of one segment of the audience. And there's a particular email that I've been anticipating and I haven't received just yet, and it's possible that the author of that email, which apparently has not been written, or at least not sent, has finally carried through on his threat to stop listening to the C-Realm podcast altogether, because he thinks I pretty much had it right back in, say, 2007, 2008, when I was really focused on peak oil and collapse and the need to transition to something more earth-friendly. And while I haven't renounced any of those themes, living here in New York City, where the illusion of business as usual is as strong as you'll find it anywhere, I think, it's really hard to stay focused on that stuff. Rest assured, though, it is still very much in my mind, and it is a topic that I will be addressing in the weeks to come. This week, however, it being the third Friday of the month, I will be putting out episode number 86 of the Psychonautica podcast. So join me and the lovely Olga Kay on the dopefiend.co.uk network for Psychonautica podcast number 86 this Friday. And join me back here in the C-Realm 1 week from today for another installment of the C-Realm podcast. I do hope that you will join me for that conversation, and until that time, I hope that you will stay well.